Performance Laboratory Director. He received his Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science from the University of Massachusetts, and both his Master's in Exercise Science and PhD in Exercise Physiology from Springfield College. Additionally, he came last year. We are very welcome to have him and inspired many students, including myself, to go out and get our CSCS. So take it away.
Thank you. How many of you had your CSCS? A few people already have it. Was it required by your undergraduate? Kind of leaning towards that. So accredited programs require you, some of them expect you to have some level of certification after undergraduate. How many had the ACSM certification? Did you have to do that for graduation? Yeah. So if you're ACSM accredited, typically some programs have figured out how to add a certification to their program. We at Lynchburg have not figured that out. I know Liberty does, but other programs do as well. But having these certifications, either the ACSM or the CSCS, provides some extra value to not only your career, but also where I think the value primarily is the continuing education component. It really helps provide you with an avenue to continuously monitor what's actually happening. You have better access to some of the stuff that's actually happening in the field. And as it's changing, I go to a conference every year and I'm learning new things about where we are in the field of strength and conditioning as a whole. So I'm also the NSCA state director for the state of Virginia. So we have a state director for every state, as well as the provinces of Canada. Not all of them have them, but some of the provinces of Canada. And I run the advisory board, but we also run a clinic every year. Our clinic is supposed to be at UVA this coming year in March or April. We haven't locked down a date yet, but so you're welcome to come out to those events and see what we have at the state level as well as the national level. Has anyone been to an NSCA conference before? No? They're a lot of fun. A lot of meatheads in a room. Really good time. It's a little bit. I go to ACSM and NSCA every year. They're two totally different animals. If you've been to ACSM or even your own professional organization, the NSCA is totally different. They held it in Vegas and Orlando. Every year it's in Vegas, pretty much. So you get an idea of what they're trying to do with the strength and conditioning group. So what are we looking at for the NSCA component? So the mission of the NSCA is primarily a few-pronged approach of what they're looking at. But primarily they're looking at trying to disseminate research-based knowledge and practical application to improve athletic performance and fitness. But their main focus primarily, if you look at it, is strength and conditioning for athletic performance. But as we move towards identifying fitness and athletic performance, there really is a very blurred line between what is human performance and what is athletic performance. Being able to be a skilled mover, a skilled practitioner of different aspects of movement doesn't mean that's much different than what has to be on sport. The highly specified demands of sport may change some of those demands and expectations that we have of movement, but the premise is still the same. But typically we're looking at a more advanced movement at that point. So what do we think is athletic performance? And the big question is athletic performance any different than performances in life? What do we think? Not really. I mean, I'm not trying to move a 300-pound lineman all the time, but those skill sets that develop in that movement pattern can be transferred to other things. And we're trying to move a refrigerator out of a spot. I think the same technique is utilized for a lineman versus you trying to move your refrigerator, especially if the refrigerator is still full. Empty it first. Makes it so much easier. So we have those same skill sets. So this stuff is transferable, and that's one of the things that we want to look at. So let's understand a brief history of the NSCA. Well, the NSCA started, and I actually got to meet this gentleman this past year. He was the one of the keynote speakers at the national conferences, Boyd Epley. He was first hired in 1969 at the University of Nebraska as a full-time strength and conditioning coach, and he led them to back-to-back state champion. They were the only people up until the 70s to actually, through the 70s, to actually have a full-time strength and conditioning coach. The only team, only program in the nation to have them. The coaches actually accredited the strength and conditioning program as their successful run for the back-to-back national championships. In the 1970s, the NATA, how many of you are athletic trainers or have an athletic training background? A few people. All right, athletic training tried to absorb the strength and conditioning field into their realm. They viewed the value of having strength and conditioning as a prehab, post-rehab component to getting athletes well prepared for their performance on the field and after. However, the strength coaches decided against that. In the 1980s, they created a journal. And in the 1980s, this lady right here, Meg Stone, also known as Meg Ritchie, that's her maiden name, but Meg Stone, became the first full-time women's coach at a Division I level. She coached the men's football team at University of Arizona. She still, to this day, holds the NCAA discus record. Division I discus record still stands from 1981 when she broke that record. But she's now a strength coach at East Tennessee State, I believe, and she runs the Olympic training program for the bobsled, skeleton, and luge teams down in Tennessee, which doesn't get any snow, so I don't know how they do that. They have a lot of push carts down there, but that's what they do. Now we have our headquarters out in Colorado Springs, and they have a joint relationship with the Olympic Training Center. That's why they're out in Colorado Springs. So there's a relationship with the Olympic Training Program that links heavily with the NSCA. So they're very closely linked. And currently, the NCAA is now looking at increased focus areas of having a certified specialist on staff. So if you want to be a strength and conditioning coach at a college, specifically Division I, you have to have one of 3 certifications. The NSCA is one of them. I believe the ACSM is another, specifically the clinical exercise physiologist one. But we also are looking at increased focus areas in TSAC, physical therapy, and they're looking at fundamental training programs again. So one of the big caveats that we've had, they're looking at in the NSCA is one of the big flaws in their certification is it's not hands-on enough. Anyone have CrossFit certification? One person, anyone else? No. So one of the battles between CrossFit and NSCA and their certification battle is one has a hands-on component, the other does not. We'll run through what are the expectations of the written component of what the NSCA requires versus some of the other ones. But that's one of the things that has been a caveat to the program in the past. They actually are starting a hands-on program. It's in its beta testing right now. It's actually the first testing session is happening this month down at UC Berkeley. But they are looking at getting back to the more hands-on component of training, making sure that you know how to do the movements, the basic movements properly. But we're also looking at TSAC. TSAC is the Tactical Strength and Conditioning Group, where they're looking at the Tactical Warrior base. Their major presentations and their major clinics are actually held in Virginia out at Quantico, out at the Navy bases and Marine bases out there. They actually have theirs coming up in April. If you're interested in that area, you can also get a TSAC certification through the NSCA as well. So that exists also. So the mission of the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist is to apply the scientific knowledge to train athletes with improving athletic performance. But like I said, what if we just take out athletes and put in people and improve performance? Just take out the athletic component. There is no difference. There is no difference. And this is where CrossFit has been very successful at marketing their program, is that they don't have athletic added in these components. They really focus on just the everyday individual person. Where they started as tactical, but now they're marketing towards everyone can do these types of workouts. The same thing is held for here, but people get caught up in these athletic words, meaning that only athletes can do this stuff. And it's not that way. Granted, the 90% of the people employed in the CSCS field primarily are in athletic space. That's their interest. That's who they want to work with. They want to work with athletes all the time. How many of you guys just want to work with athletes? Go ahead, raise your hand. Vast majority of, I think 90% of the students that I see who come in with an interest in PT at the undergraduate level all say they want to work with athletes. Granted, that changes over time. We've had 2 that have left here, this program, and gone on to work with athletes, or done their athletic side of things. Obviously those changes. You have multiple areas of fields, but this stuff can be transferred very easily, which is nice. So what is the exam components? The exam components have slightly changed. So I did update some of the information on this page, but they did come out with a new textbook. So the textbook that is based upon this came out with the 4th version. Thank God, because the last 3rd version wasn't updated, hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. So they finally updated and filled in some of the mistakes. They've added some other components. They have added a non-traditional training component, so working with Atlas stones and logs and yoke carries and all that stuff is now a training component as well. Or chains and bands, you guys have seen those before, right? Accommodating resistance style type training has been added to the expectation of expertise that these certification groups are supposed to have. But primarily what we're looking at is a test that has a scientific and a practical application component. The scientific foundation is probably going to be the easiest part for most people, specifically if you've read the textbook, or for you, you've graduated out of a program that is probably very heavy in exercise science. How many of you are exercise science based? If you're not exercise science, are you coming from a science? Right. So the vast majority, I'm not saying that there's other areas in here. I've seen people graduated with history and English degrees and languages who've gone on to practice physical therapy. But the vast majority right now are coming from science heavy and specifically exercise science heavy field. So primarily these are going to be the biggest components and the easiest side of the component of this. The more difficult side is the practical application. This is where most people start to struggle. And it comes down to programming, periodization, warm-up flexibility, our new non-traditional training, and plyometrics. How do you understand exercise technique? How do you understand program design? What is the progression of programming that you should be following? And the thing I like to point out when I teach this in my class is that this is only a guideline. This is the starting base structure of program design. And everything is going to change depending upon the goals of the athlete, the needs of the athlete, the injury risk or injury history of the athlete. So it's very, very broad. It's not hyper-specific in terms of what you're expected to know for the program design, and that's where a lot of, and I'm sure some of my students can attest to this, that's where the class gets difficult. There's really no right answer in program design, so long as you follow some basic tenets of what that design should be. And that's where a lot of these students, when they take the certification, get held up, because those types of questions that are asked, pretty much every answer could be a possibility. And you really have to digest the question to make sure you identify what are the major components that they're looking for, and what are the major caveats to that. The pass rate for the CSCS exam is about 60%, meaning that 60% of the people who take the CSCS pass it. So it is a pretty difficult exam, which is kind of what they're trying, at least on the first time. So it is a relatively difficult exam understanding all of these components. And the amount of number of people who took this exam is the reason why they got rid of the hands-on component, but now they're adding it back in because they now have the manpower with the NSCA office to direct more of a hands-on component. And they've started to build up some of that grassroots where they have people doing it. So there will be another component added to this, and it's oftentimes, it'll probably be a separate classification. that you would get. So what? So why do you need to know all of this stuff? A number of random facts that I just threw out just Googled all of these facts. I saw some of these from a presentation by Avery Feigenbaum, who is the leading researcher in child-based exercise physiology from the College of New Jersey. If you're interested in children-based exercise physiology, look up Avery Feigenbaum. He's the one you want to look at. But we have kids placed 47th out of 50 in countries comparison in aerobic fitness. 9% of teenagers get 60 minutes of moderate physical activity or moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. Stronger kids have better metabolic profiles. And my favorite quote, Mark Ripito, stronger people are harder to kill than weak people. So when it comes down to it, understanding the principles of strength and conditioning should be the basis of most of our fitness-based training. It's one of the things that Avery Feigenbaum brings up when he talks about these profile programs, is we've actually gotten rid of the basic body weight strength required exercises and gameplay that children used to get comfortable playing. They don't have monkey bars much anymore because you may break an arm. How many of you have broken an arm or broken a limb before? All right? If I had asked that same question about 20 years ago, everyone in this room probably would have raised their hand. We have actually taken away a lot of these risk factors for what we would consider drastic injuries, even though we know that a broken arm really isn't that drastic in this day and age in terms of an injury. We can get a lot worse injuries. But we've actually taken away these things, and children aren't able to do some of the skills that they are comfortable doing. They're not hanging upside down as much anymore doing things, so they don't develop the internal awareness of where they are in space. So losing all of these things, they don't have the strength to do it, they don't have the power to do these things, but they're also losing some of the vestibular components that are needed to actually function well and easy. And Avery posted a great picture one time, or video one time, where he had a kid trying to jump into a pool, and there was this little kid, he had swimmies on, and he ran and jumped. He was probably about 10 feet away from the pool when he took off. And he landed short of the pool and then rolled and then fell in the pool. And he was putting that as an example of these skills that they don't have anymore because they're not playing on these instruments that require some level of strength. We've shortened the slides. We've taken off those roundabout things that were death traps where you just launched other kids off. The human catapult, the seesaw, we've gotten rid of those things. But what we've done is we've really hurt how we've actually caused and removed some of these components or these stair steps that we actually have in terms of the model of human performance, that we've actually taken some of these out in terms of play. So when we look here on the right-hand side here, I have two different triangles. I have the hierarchy of athletic development, and we have a modified rehabilitation model. We have up here, we have evaluation, work capacity, strength, explosive strength, reactive strength, and speed. Down here, what's different? Mobility and movement. Mobility and movement is the only different component. Is that where you guys fit? But is that all you guys fit? No. Right? So, one of the big things with PT is that they really hyper-focus on mobility, evaluation and testing, mobility and movement, and then getting up to that work capacity. So whose job is it to do it the next time? Whose job is it to continue on the hierarchy of getting an individual developed to be able to get to accurate speed? Because I don't care how strong you are, if you can't do something with speed, you're going to take away a certain percentage of your actual basic functions. So you have to be able to do all of these skill sets. Now, we don't want to pigeonhole one career group into just one little group. Would that be fun just working on that all the time? No, I want to get into some speed. I want to get some med ball throws or do something where we have some power and explosiveness and fun on that component. So we have to go through this whole progression of movement patterns. And the CSCS really focuses on what are the techniques needed physiologically and scientifically on how do we get through the steps of corrective exercises, how do we move from corrective exercises to stability and endurance, to strength endurance. We have hypertrophy, maximum strength, power, and maximum power. Everything is on a continuum. We have the ability to move through all of these things, and the CSCS is designed to give you a base knowledge of where is your programming going and what should you be doing to get those basic steps. Where's the physiology? What's the underlying physiology? And then what should we be doing to get hypertrophy out of an individual muscle group? All right, what if it's not working? How do we alter and change those programming within the schemes that we're looking at to make sure that we get the best out of that individual? 3 times 10 may work for hypertrophy for some people. 3 times 15 might do the other for another person. So knowing the ranges and knowing how to test and retest, looking at those rep ranges and sets and intensities, those are going to get you into the place where you want to look at human performance. So where do we look at the model of human performance in terms of knowing our limitation? One, where are we set? For right now, we are very truncated into individual groups. You have the medical side all the way up to the training sport competition side. Who's in charge of what? Right? So we have our medical doctor over here, then we have our coach over here. What is the basic high school role for an athlete? What? Student. What do? They go if they get injured, where do they go? They go to the doctor, and then where do they go? Hopefully to a PT, but not always the case, right? They go right to the coach. Where are they going back? Right back to the doctor. So so I really love the college model. The college model should be the ideal model that we have, right? So what do you have in the college model? Any college athletes here? What was your college model? You're a sport doctor. You had an athletic trainer, PT, strength and conditioning coach. Then you had your coach. Did they talk to each other? Hopefully. The ideal situation is they all would be in contact all the time. They would know where their limitations are, and they would know the progress of how to get from one group to the next. If you don't have the requisite knowledge of what the strength coach is doing, and some of these athletes in high school may have strength coaches, and you have them on one point, and then you let them go to the next phase, and there's no communication, or you don't know where they're going to be going, understanding what the next group is doing is paramount into making sure that this pattern works well. Knowing what the next group needs to be doing and will be doing and where they're going to be going. If you don't have barbells in your facility and you let the athlete go or the person go, where are they going to go? They're going to go to a gym. What do gyms have? Barbells and dumbbells. What are they going to want to do? Get under a barbell, start using some dumbbells. So they're going to do this. So understanding and being able to utilize the knowledge of what a strength and conditioning professional may do, you can then help program or help communicate or give individuals programming that may help them continue on whatever therapy you're giving them to get them to the next step safely. And being able to communicate that, and maybe not, I understand you're limited in how many times you can see patients and all that stuff, but you can make, if you ever see SCS, you can start making programming recommendations to that person as they leave, as they walk out. Give them a workout set. Give them some stuff that they can do on their own. Figure out how to do that. Or, if they have a personal trainer, figure out a communication method where you can communicate with a personal trainer. Where are they in their therapy? Where do they need to go? Understanding what the personal trainer is going to be giving them through their level of a CSCS is going to be paramount to making sure that they get back to sport training and competition and don't start to cycle over and over and over again, which is typical of most athletes anyway. Also typical of most people, right? Once you have a back injury, you're coming in a lot. or hamstring. So we have to bridge the gap. We have to bridge the gap in terms of where are we, in terms of what are we allowing individuals to do. Oftentimes, whatever profession you're in, you oftentimes get complacent after a certain amount of time by doing things. So you always, which is hopefully you're up to the task of continuing the ed component of your field. Once you graduate and become a licensed physical therapist, hopefully that's not the stopping point of your education and learning and doing all the things you need to do to get your people better. But what we need is we need to make sure that we bridge the gap between what's actually happening in the science and what we understand human movement to be and what we can allow individuals to do. We still have doctors telling pregnant people not to do exercise, right? We still have them telling you not to lift weights. But we know on our side of things that you can lift weights. Obviously, there's some caveats, but you can do it safely so long as you fulfill all of those classifications. And you can do it at a relatively high level. You can play sport at a relatively high level. Serena Williams' daughter nickname or initials are AO Williams. Australian Open. She actually named her daughter with the initials AO because that's what she said in her tweet, because she helped me win the Australian Open because she was pregnant when she won. All right, so we have the capability of being able to exercise pregnant at a very, very high level. So we have to understand where's the gap, and we need to bridge that gap in terms of knowing what it's capable of, what's safe, and what we can actually do. And we can utilize barbell training, we're going to look at, or strength training, with any group that we want. We just have to figure out a way to modify it the best for our individuals. I think that's where the CSCS fulfills a lot of the components that may be missing in a traditional physical therapy program. Barbell training, where you guys don't have any barbells here, right? Like you have to rely on doing that stuff on your own on the other side of campus, going to Wakefield House or our fun gym in Turner, right? So we're very limited in what we have here, and you're very limited, and I would gather most PT programs are like that. Where do you get your barbell strength training knowledge from? Hopefully not Muscle and Fiction magazine. Hopefully you can get it from a replicable source like the CSCS. There's some other certifications that are out there. I still value this. I think the CSCS is the best. I've been to a number of their conferences to understand why they get to the answers that they're getting to. But we have to be able to bridge the gap. There are no limitations on movement so long as we can get them to that. And this is a grandmother doing deadlifts at a powerlifting meet. I went to a powerlifting meet at Liberty over the summer, and there was an older lady doing powerlifting. She was a beast. She beat a lot of the younger girls. But then the younger girls beat a lot of the guys. So some guy did squat 700 pounds, 800 pounds, 700 or 800 pounds. He started in the sixes. You only get three tries. He started in the 600, so that was pretty impressive. So the value of the CSCS that I think that drives why someone should probably get it, even if you're in your field. That is PT, that is highly sought after. I don't think the CSCS is going to drive any extra clients to you for the most part, unless you actually are going to look for those sports and those athletes. But the CSCS and the information that you're going to have to get to even pass the CSCS will give you an appreciation and some other ideas of how to implement the basics that we know what strength and conditioning are and how we use strength and conditioning to improve performance that can be easily transferable to the general public. And that's the one thing that you have to identify. And when I talk about it in my class is you remove athlete out of it, the general public can do all of these things. So I think that's where a lot of people scare away from it. Oh, it's not going to do anything with my job. But I've talked to Dr. Smith about this, that he really likes the fact that students get this because it provides a lot of understanding beyond specifically with movements that we are looking at beyond what you get in PT, which is very heavy in a certain skill that you need. I can't do movement analysis very well. That's not my expertise. That's going to be your expertise. Where do you get movement analysis, and then where do you go on from that? And how do we get athletes or individuals better at that component? So it's going to give you a few different components. Understand movement analysis, but that's going to be your bread and butter anyway. But understand the techniques of exercise, different modalities. Specifically, I'm looking at the barbell style weights, because that's something that you don't get a lot of in physical therapy training, is where those barbells and those weights play a role in moving on. And that's does anyone know Don Regan down at Chatham? He's very big into using this, but his background is powerlifting. His background is powerlifting and elliptic weightlifting, so he has all of this stuff and he implements them very heavily into his training because of this understanding. And I like using him as an example for that. Understanding the physiology of specific strength force development, relationship between human power, human performance, and movement. And then I like the big one is continuing education. And it's great to see debates in the field of what's going on in terms of strength and conditioning. Down here is Mike Boyle. If you're in this field, Mike Boyle is one of the premier strength and conditioning coaches in the country. He's the strength coach for the BU hockey team, which has won multiple national championships. He's also the strength coach for the U.S. women's hockey team right now. He was a strength coach for the Red Sox at one point. But he's a big proponent of single leg exercises. He very rarely has his athletes squat with two legs. They're usually doing single leg squats, rear foot elevated squats. And his premise, and he's gotten a lot of debates with this with Meg Stone's husband, actually. I've seen them screaming at each other at a conference. Debates about the value of one versus the other. And if you think of, he makes a very valid point, but you have to see where it works for your athletes. If I'm looking at a hockey athlete, the majority of my force production is single leg kind of off to the side to get propulsion, which is different than running, which is more like the single leg, which a double leg squat can actually give you. Single leg squat is actually going to mimic a hockey movement a little better than that of a running movement. So he values that movement. And actually you can put more weight on and not have issues with the low back. So think about how people mostly squat. Really lean forward. And wherever the bar placement is or how they're doing it, they can lean forward. It's very hard to lean forward in a single leg squat. You're pretty much going to stay vertical the entire time. So if we're looking at different types of movement patterns with risk factors, we can look at how to change the way we move to make sure that our physics and biomechanics stay sound and develop positions where you can be actually very successful and healthy. I just like to put up straight pictures. So he's an Olympic lifter, that's the mountain. Any questions? Nothing. No questions. Yeah, there we go.
With the tests, you have the practical part, so that's online practical learning as well, and not.
Yeah, so the practical application part is online. It's a lot of videos. As well as questions regarding individual athletes and what their program should be, identifying weaknesses and strengths of an athlete. Like they'll give you a list of all their scores in different weight lifts, and then what would be your idea for program? What would you be doing to help that athlete be better?
And then if they change it to hands-on, will they have like multiple sites?
They'll have sites, yeah. They're still working on that component, but they're going to have multiple sites as well. Yeah. So, yes.
How long would you typically recommend someone study for this?
Depending upon your background, have you had any of this before? Okay. In general, probably. I mean, reading through the book and the textbook is probably going to take some time. My recommendation for the past students who have taken it in the past and have passed was about 3 months that they did it. I think Tyler did that. He took, when he was going somewhere, he just took his first session that he was gone. He just studied during the nights and then he took it when he was back. Yes?
How much does it cost?
That is a good question. In that they were last time I had heard that they were revisiting the cost point, especially with the adding of the next component. I think the last time I checked it was like $350.
That's, is that license, considered for students or student rate versus?
That is the student rate. That is just the student rate. Yeah. So I mean, that is probably the big caveat to students taking it right out of college is $350. It's a lot of money at that time, and I get it. But it should be a long-term investment. So $350 over your career is pennies at that point. Yes.
When is the hands-on part of it going to be implemented?
At the last meeting, they had not discussed when it would be implemented. They're beta testing it now. So they have the book, they have the trainers, they're going out and giving different groups individual access right now to see how it flows. So I would guess probably next year. Yeah. Yes.
Apart from the cost, what would you say would be some of the biggest advantages or disadvantages to getting this while in PT school versus, upon graduating?
Directly from PT school, the students that I've had taken, the people I've known who are in the field in PT school, it gave them a different avenue with respect to how they program their therapies. And they rethought how they were doing it, knowing where is my progression going, where's my end. So what happened was a lot of this point, their endpoint changed from being pain management to beyond pain management to, okay, now movement, strength, movement, power, how do we get there? And the ones that I have talked to said that they rethought of how they were looking at their programming as to add some of this component into their programming when they were doing their therapies. Yeah.
So, just kind of to build off that question, is there any benefit to getting it while you're still in school, or just get it after you graduate?
The benefit to getting it while you're in school is that you're currently in that mode of studying and doing all of these things, and it can actually help with some of your other classes, depending upon what year you are. It may help with the exercise physiology class with Dr. Moore. You're going through that textbook stuff, so it may play a role in that. And the other one is once you leave, with all the life changes that happen once you graduate and you get a new job and you move somewhere and you have to find a place to live and all that stuff starts to add up. You're starting to get your clientele, you're starting to do all that stuff. It goes by the wayside. And then the ones that I've heard who haven't taken it, they've told me that I wish I had taken it when I took it. Because some of their colleagues in wherever they're working have been getting different attention based upon them having CSCS. Not saying everyone, but some of them have had that. They've told me.
This is semi-unrelated, but I was just curious your thoughts on the NSCA's special population certification.
The special population certification, the only special population certification that they've really targeted well that I think so far has been the TSAC special population. Now with respect to the more, I think what you're talking about what we think of in PT and in therapy as special population, I don't know where that is. I haven't seen their literature on that yet. I know the authors of some of the literature, and they are really good at what they do, but I haven't delved into that myself yet. But I know it's coming. So, like Dr. Fagenbaum is actually doing a children's one in terms of how to develop this. but I know there's other special populations that we're working with, but I haven't seen any of this stuff. I just know they're offers. So, anything else? All right, that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.